I'm Jackie Schertz, and welcome to Hey Listen. Today's topic is a day in the life of a homicide investigator. We have several guests with us today, two of whom are with the Rochester Police Department, who investigate physical crimes. So they're investigators, and we also have the Assistant District Attorney with us today, as well as some Rochester Police Department technicians who will show us how they collect some evidence. So I'm happy that we have all of them on the show, and come on back. Hello and welcome back. We're with some officers to investigate a day in the life of a homicide investigator. And my two guests with me are Lenny Borriello and William Barnes, both of whom are with the Rochester Police Department with the Physical Investigation Unit. They're both homicide investigators, and with them we have our interpreter, Kip, in the middle. Many people would like to know what you do, and we're happy to have you here so we can talk to you about your jobs. First of all, I'm interested in finding out how you got involved with your jobs. What led you to be interested in being police officers?
It's exciting. Very rewarding, and I feel like I'm making a contribution to society by taking a criminal element off the street and making the city a better place for decent citizens to live in.
Okay. Do you want to continue doing that for the rest of your life, and is this what you enjoy?
Yes, it is. Very interesting, rewarding, and I do enjoy it.
Great. And how about you, Bill?
Well, I always wanted to be a policeman for a long time. And as far as what Lenny said, I agree with him. It has been a very rewarding career.
Okay. Even though we know what you do requires a lot from you, for example, you need to work day and night, sometimes 24, 48 hours on a job, do you really enjoy being involved with your job?
Yes, very much.
Okay. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about burnout. I know that what you do requires a lot of your time. I remember at one point when I was talking to you before the program, we were interrupted when your pager went off and you had to go someplace and answer a call. And I'm wondering if this seems to demand an awful lot of time on your part. And so I'm wondering about your family life. Does it take away from that?
yes, it does take away from your family life. You have to have a very understanding companion. But as I said before, the results are very rewarding. You try to get involved in things that would take your mind off your occupation, hobbies, getting together with friends, and the rewards are just great.
I think when you get involved in, especially like involved in homicides, I think you have to go in with the understanding that it is going to be a demanding job, and it's going to be a job that's going to require a lot of time, and you're just going to have to deal with it by finding other activities.
Well, I've often heard people tell me that people in your line of work often experience marital problems, psychological difficulties. Can you tell us anything about that?
The married problems are there.
I think that's true in any occupation. Doctors, teachers, lawyers. I think it depends on the person and the person you're married to, and not just true in police officers.
Okay, to change the subject, I'm wondering about how technology has influenced your job with the advent of computer graphics and the development in fingerprint technology. I'm wondering what kind of technologies have benefited you for your work.
It's been a great benefit, and it's getting better all the time. We expect shortly a new latent fingerprint classification computer. Hopefully, if we have a crime, we'll be able to, if fingerprints are obtained at the scene of a crime, to submit it to this computer, and hopefully it will come out with maybe 9 possibilities that may have committed the crime, providing that the person you're looking for has a record. This has been very successful in California, and hopefully in the future it'll be successful in Rochester.
I also am aware that, when you investigate different cases, I wonder if you need any particular type of special intelligence. Does it require any special training, or what types of things do you need to know how to do your job?
I think the most important thing is to have common sense and to feel compassion for the victim.
Mm-hmm. And I think it takes a lot, probably more than common sense. Any other ideas?
Hard work.
Okay.
Long hours.
Okay. Right now, one of the hot issues on the table these days is related to gun control. And what's your point of view on this issue? It seems that weapons are very easily available, and with the, I'm wondering if there's correlation between the increase of gun availability and crimes.
Guns are very, very available to the public nowadays. I think there should be a more strict gun control, but then again, it's not up to the police department. This is up to the legislature. It's just been that way in the United States. Guns are very readily available, not only in Rochester, but in every city. But that would be determined by the government to come up with more strict gun control laws.
The problem is,
Right.
the problem is that the guns are getting into the hands of people that want to use them to harm other people, not like sportsmen and people that like gun collectors. They're just getting into the hands of the wrong type of people.
Right. So But the question, well, perhaps a question of the appropriate use of handguns, and how do we make a determination what a person will be using the gun for when he purchases it? I know that in Rochester in 1988, there were 39 homicides, and that seems to be an increase over previous years. Could you give us an idea of what possibly is causing this increase? Is it that guns are more readily available?
No, I think it's the cocaine traffic that's causing the increase in homicides. And the people that are trafficking in cocaine are arming themselves with very dangerous weapons.
Okay, so drugs is perhaps one cause and the availability of handguns is another. What other possible reasons could there be for the rise in homicides?
Well, I think homicide rate varies every year. In 1978, I believe, or 77, we had 52 homicides. Homicide is not a crime you can control. It's a crime of passion in many cases. Family troubles, armed robberies. It's just not a controllable crime. Nothing you can prevent by crime prevention. As my partner says, many crimes are drug-related, which we're running into more now than we ever have in the past.
Okay, so related to drugs, it seems that there are more drugs out on the street, and there are probably more homicides that are related to that. That's very interesting. To get away from that topic for a moment, how do you two handle the stress that you experience on your job? I imagine that you see a lot of homicides, and perhaps you become more callous and more inured to seeing people who have died. How do you handle that?
I work the stress off by going to the Y and working out, and I like to play basketball, and I think I get the stress off me that way.
I think also your first obligation is to the victim, and once you make an arrest, especially in a homicide, it's very rewarding, and it takes a lot of stress off you.
That's true.
Okay, related to the fact that you've seen many deaths and you can feel perhaps hardened to that, does that happen in real life? Do you become desensitized to it?
I don't think I am. I still feel very sorry for the victim. No, I don't think I've become hard or became hard.
Okay, we talked a little bit earlier. Lenny and Bill, you both work together as partners, and it seems that you must spend a lot of time together, day and night. Do you sometimes feel as if you're married to each other with your work as partners?
I think people think we are married. It seems that way. We do spend a lot of time. Not only do we spend a lot of time on duty, but we also spend a lot of time off duty because I think we're very good friends and we understand each other. And it's good to have someone that understands you that you can talk to. And I can do that with Lenny, and certainly he can do that with me.
And I also think it's very advantageous that we've worked together for so long because we know each other so well. When we are investigating a crime, we know practically what each other is thinking and what route the other is taking, whether we're at the crime scene or interviewing a suspect.
So, like any married couple, do you have to work on your relationship?
We have our spats.
Sometimes I lock him out of the police car.
Okay, a friend of mine often says that one gets the coffee and the other one pays for it. But at any rate, we need to take a break now, and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. We're continuing with the day in the life of a homicide investigator. Now, suppose a homicide has occurred and you two are called to the scene. What's the very first thing that you would do? What happens first, and how do you proceed?
Well, we go right to the scene of the crime. We make a brief sketch of the crime itself in our pad, check for any witnesses or suspects that may have been apprehended by uniformed personnel upon our arrival. A neighborhood check, any physical evidence that may have been obtained.
I think the most important thing to do is start talking to people. After you walk in and you view the body, you view the deceased if it's still there, then you start talking to people. You talk to the uniform officer that first arrived, talk to the technicians that are there. You talk to neighbors, anybody on the street. You try to find out as much as you can. And you also try to talk to the victim's family to find out who the victim is, what the victim has been doing, how did he wind up here at this particular place.
Okay, so suppose people around the scene say that they didn't see anything, they didn't hear anything, they have no idea, and you can't get any information from the people around the scene. Then what do you do?
You have to concentrate, I think, on the victim's family to find out, something about the victim. And usually if you find out something about the victim, you can find out why he's in that location.
So you find out why the person is there, and then does that help you to recreate what might have happened, and so that you can retrace his steps? Is that what you mean?
If you find out a reason why the victim was there, usually it helps you immensely finding out what purpose he had being there, who may have been around him. There are also other methods. We have another computerized system called the field interview form system, which is uniformed personnel patrolling an area. Say at 3 o'clock in the morning, they may see a suspicious individual being in an area with no reason. They would take his name, address, date of birth, such and such forth, and make a card out, and it would go into our computer. At a later date, if we had a homicide in a certain location, we would be able to check the computer to see the names of people that may have been in this area for no reason.
Most of the time, though, you're going to find somebody, if not in the first hour, maybe in the first 8 hours, that knows how this person got there, knows who this person was associating with. You're going to find something out that's going to give you some direction.
Okay. I believe we have a question from our audience now.
Yes, I have a question about your investigation. When you're finding out information, and after that, how long does it take to solve a crime, to find out who the murderer was? Does it take a year, 2 years, 1 month? How long, and how many cases do you handle each year?
Well, a homicide case is never closed. It's always open, pending new information. But usually the best time to solve a homicide is as soon as it occurs, usually within a 24-hour period to a 48-hour period, while the clues are still fresh. But, as I said, a case is never closed, pending more information coming in.
Each case differs, too. You can't tell. You might arrive at the scene and the uniformed personnel already has the person in custody. So you really can't tell. You just can't say how long it's going to take you.
About how many unsolved cases do you have open now?
This past year we had 12, although we are working on some, and hopefully we expect arrest in some from the past year, but it's hard to say.
Instead of saying unsolved, we'd like to say open, because we do have some names and ideas.
I see. Okay. There's another question here.
I've been thinking about, for example, people who have the same color hair or something like that. If somebody died and somebody has the same color hair as the murderer, how can you match the hair or different evidence with a particular suspect?
Well, hair fibers just shows the same consistency, not a positive identification. The positive identification would come from the teeth or fingerprints.
Hair can also tell race, the race of a suspect.
Okay, suppose you have a suspect in mind. Do you bring someone in and then interrogate them?
If we have enough probable cause to bring him in, yes, we do. Or we might even talk to him in his home, talk to him on the street. But if the probable cause is there, we're definitely going to make contact with that person.
Or if he is willing to come in to talk to us.
Well, then suppose the person is resistant to answering your questions and they want a lawyer, then what do you do?
We stop our interview at that time.
And we help him get a lawyer. We give him the opportunity to contact a lawyer.
Well, I understand that often people are pressured into admitting information, and I see where policemen bring people in and say, oh, you don't want to cooperate with us, and start pressuring them subtly, and then maybe a person will spill out information. I'm wondering if you do that kind of thing.
No.
Lenny says you get more with honey than vinegar, so we use the honey approach. We treat the person like we would want to be treated.
I see. Okay, we have another question here.
Officer Borriello was saying before that if you had your way, you would change the gun control laws. I just had a question for both of you. Other than the gun control laws, if you could make any law, what law would you make?
What law would I make if I could make any law other than a gun control law? Well, I think what's hurting our society now more than anything are the drugs. I don't know if I could make it a law, but I think I would educate the younger population now before they're older, before it's too late, and educate them to the point where they would maybe not get into the problem we have now.
The laws are really there. It's just that there's some people that just don't want to follow them. I mean, it just, cocaine and it brings a lot of money. There's a lot of greed there. And they just don't want to, live within our rules, I guess, or our laws.
Okay. I'm wondering right now, what was your most serious crime that you investigated that you could tell us about?
Well, homicide is most serious, I think. Sunshine McKendry I felt was very, very serious. But all homicides are serious, but she was only, I think she was only an 11-year-old girl.
Oh.
And
okay.
I felt that was very important to solve.
Okay, I'm not familiar with Sunshine McKendry, who you mentioned. Could you tell us a little bit about what that case was all about?
Yes, she was murdered on the railroad tracks over by Kent Street by I think he was a 20-year-old male at the time. And she was on her way to school early in the morning. And he dragged her down the tracks, and I believe he strangled her.
Oh. Was that a solved case?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Took us about, I think, 5 days.
Okay. Oh, we have another person over here.
You may have just answered what I'm going to ask. Which of your solved cases has given you the most satisfaction?
Well, that one certainly.
That one.
Also, Susan Brown gave me a lot of satisfaction.
Susan Brown, which one was that?
She was murdered in her home on East Main Street. Her husband hired two 16-year-old youths
I
to
recall.
murder her, and it was probably one of the coldest homicides that I've ever investigated.
I remember. Thank you.
All right. What was the decision in the Brown case?
He was found guilty.
I believe that there was a technicality related to that case. Something having to do with the fact that they were found guilty and then a higher court reversed the decision. There was a change in the law or something like that, and it needed to be retried. And I believe the person was again found guilty, am I correct?
That's correct. Yes, he was.
Suppose the person had been found innocent the first time, and during an appeal or a retrial, could they be found guilty after that?
No. They wouldn't be able to be retried. If they were found innocent the first time, that would be double jeopardy.
Okay, you're right. All right. Well, time is close to running out in this segment, and so in our next segment, we will be having the police technicians come join us, and they'll display various types of evidence and also demonstrate how to lift fingerprints. And so thank you very much, Lenny and Bill, for coming and talking with us today about your job. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So stay with us and we'll be right back. Welcome back again. We're continuing with a day in the life of a homicide investigator. And right now we have two new guests up here with us, actually three, who are joining us now. First we have Robert Dillman, Bob, who is a technician with the Rochester Police Department, and he'll be demonstrating the techniques of how to gather evidence and a variety of other things. We also have Charles Siragusa, who is the first assistant district attorney. And he's with the Monroe County Division. And also in our audience, we have Greg McCracken, who is also a technician. And if you have anything to add, please feel free to jump in at any time. So, Bob, to start out with, could you demonstrate some things for us? And what do you have to show us today?
Well, first of all, Jakey, I brought some of my basic equipment with me. The stuff that I use to gather fingerprints, collect evidence, and preserve all of that stuff. I start out by saying that we work basically in conjunction with physical crimes and the homicide investigators. And that I mean that we arrive at the same, approximately the same time, and we do at first basically the same thing. We try to secure the scene and keep people who aren't necessary out. We try to preserve the scene as well as we can. Then, of course, we, as technicians, we photograph. The homicide investigators, of course, explain that they do their initial investigation. They speak with the people, and they gather all the important testimony that's to be gathered. On the other side, we photograph, make documentation of the way the scene is. We will then continue on to...
Oh, could you hold it right there? I've seen things on TV, I admit. Some scene of the crime situations where there's an outline of the body on the floor. The person who is laying there. What's the purpose of the outline? Is that the job of the technician? Do you do that type of thing?
I think the primary purpose of the outline is if the person is questionable, and by questionable I mean if there's a chance he's going to survive, of course he's going to go to the hospital. In preserving that scene, we're going to try to depict his position as well as we can.
Oh.
If he isn't moved or she isn't moved, that's another problem. But if they are moved, for any chance, we know where the deceased person was. It helps us with our investigation and later on.
Oh, okay. Fine, thanks. Also, I'm wondering about fingerprints. How do you do that type of thing? How do you lift a fingerprint, so to speak?
Fingerprint lifting is relatively simple. The more difficult part gets when you're trying to identify and characterize the print. What I'll do is I'll ask a volunteer to come up and hold this cup for just a second, and I will try to process his fingerprint on the cup. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to see it, but I'll explain further what a fingerprint is and how we work with the fingerprint.
Okay, fine. Okay, do we have a volunteer? Come on up here. Thank you very much.
I hope we have enough.
Oh, you promise this won't go down on any police record, right?
I can't promise anything.
No? Oh, I think you're going to have to be on your best behavior from here on out.
We have a lot of different processes in which to process prints. We have several different powders, several different colors that we use depending on the surface and the texture of the surface. I want to point out first of all that you were talking about technology earlier. In addition to the basic powders that I'm going to use here today, are different things like alternate light sources, laser lights, things that will be coming to us fairly soon in Rochester Police Department. So there are just numerous ways to lift prints and collect evidence. But basically what I'm going to do right here, this is what we call magna powder, and it has the consistency, of graphite. A lot of ways it's similar to graphite in that it adheres to a magnet.
Oh, okay.
Now, with this cup that our volunteer held in his hand, I'm going to see if I can raise a print for you. Now I have one print there, and I'm going to try the other side to see if I can get the other side. Okay, once we've lifted the print, we have a transfer tape.
Okay, could you maybe pick up the cup so we could see that on our camera?
Okay, the print left by our volunteer, one of them is right here. Probably the best one. I don't know if you can see it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now what I'm going to do is with the transfer tape is lift that print and then transfer it onto a contrasting background, which is similar to the cup. Now once I get the air bubbles out of it, and it's all smoothed down, I just merely lift it up. And place it on a white card.
Oh, I see.
And there we have a fingerprint.
Mm-hmm. So then, now what do you do with that after you have that set?
Now I would take that fingerprint and we try to determine which finger it is, and we try to match it up to any possible suspects that we have, if we have a suspect. If we don't have a suspect, obviously we can't match it up.
So you mean that each finger has its own particular characteristic? For example, a ring finger might be different from an index finger, and you can tell that?
That's correct. And to the best of my knowledge and the best of most experts' knowledge, no two fingerprints are alike in the world.
Right, I was aware of that.
Now, basically, let me show you what a fingerprint is. Can you see that? Okay. This here is a latent print that was lifted off a surface. Let's suppose it was a crime scene. And this here is what we call an inked fingerprint, which is taken under ideal circumstances in our lab. That's when we fingerprint someone, and this is basically the type of print we come up with when it's magnified. Now, this print and this print are the same print, and the way that we determine that is by counting the various points on here. You'll see these little marks right here. I don't know if you can get in close enough on that. 1 and 2. Those are what we call, well, number 2 is a ridge ending, and number 1 is a bifurcation. Okay, these all add up to what we call points of identification. Most of us require at least 7 points of identification, and on this one you see 11. If we can get 7 points of identification, we can pretty much determine whether or not that person is the same person. The problem being that when we transfer the inked or the latent print, sometimes they're distorted. So an exact count has to be made from the core, which is the center of the print, to these different points.
So fingerprinting is one example of collecting evidence. What are other ways that you do that?
We collect evidence, I believe as mentioned before, there are so many different kinds of evidence. Hair particles, follicles, clothing, the threads. It sometimes goes as far as the dry skin off a person's body. A live person's body.
Wow.
The chemist usually does intricate things like that, but we collect blood samples and all these various things. We will take specimens from carpets, hardwood floors. On a homicide, we will. It takes us sometimes up to 12, 14 hours in an enclosed area to collect and preserve all the evidence.
Interesting. Okay, I think we have a question in our audience here.
I have a question about the fingerprinting. When you lift it from the cup and match it up with another fingerprint, is there ever a problem if some people, you know, for example, myself, I've never gotten my fingerprints taken with the police department or anywhere else. I've never done that in a lab, and so how do you match someone's fingerprints with the things that you get at the crime scene? Do you know what I mean? Are we required to do an official fingerprinting of ourselves?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. So you mean that since you don't have a record in the police department, and if you are involved with a crime for the first time, how would someone know that the fingerprint that they found was related to you? I think we have to wait to answer that until the next segment, so stay with us. We'll be right back. We have more now on a day in the life of a homicide investigator. We just had a question from the audience which related to the idea that a person would be involved in a case for the first time and would be a suspect, and the police might find their fingerprints but they have no record on them. And so Bob is going to explain what they do in that case.
Well, quite obviously, we couldn't compare the prints to a set of prints that we don't have. And I'm not sure that we have the right to take the prints from a person just because we need them. The person, I believe, is going to have to be suspect to the crime first. And once the person's suspect, then I think either we can request the prints or obtain a court order. I think probably our Assistant District Attorney, Chuck Saragusa, could probably answer the question a little bit better than I.
I'd be glad to. As far as taking prints...
Fine, thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. Thank you for the comments. Okay.
As far as taking prints, you have to have what the law calls probable cause. It means a legal reason. So the police have to have a legal reason. That is, they have to have evidence that you're a suspect in a crime before they can require you to take your prints. So you don't have to worry, they can't take your prints.
Okay, is that a good answer?
Yes.
All right. So, as a DA, you prosecute a case. Suppose the evidence has been collected and all of the information clearly indicates that a person is guilty. And then when that suspect gets to court, they find a hotshot lawyer who gets them off on a technicality, and they go free. How do you feel about that? Even though you know that he is obviously guilty, and then they're out walking free on the streets. How do you respond to that?
Well, as I said, it hasn't happened yet, at least not with the two officers who you saw appear before you today. But if it did happen, you would obviously feel bad. The big thing about the law is that a person doesn't have to prove themselves innocent of a crime. The people, that is the prosecution, has to prove them guilty. So frequently, or not frequently, but it has happened where an individual who I know is guilty may walk not because they're innocent, but because you can't prove by the evidence that comes in at trial that they committed a crime. But it doesn't happen too much, so don't worry about it.
I see. So, do you go to the scene of the crime yourself? Is that one of your responsibilities as the assistant DA?
Yes, it is. With respect to homicide cases, one of my responsibilities is, if called out by the police, to go to the scene of a homicide, hopefully to assist the police if I can with legal decisions, or in the event that things such as search warrants to get into premises are needed, I can assist them with that.
Related to evidence, I know that you use a variety of things, but what are different types of evidence you've used in the past?
Well, anything that comes in at a trial is called evidence. The most important kind of evidence, I think very obviously, is the observations of witnesses. So that's the chief kind of evidence that you would introduce at a trial. That is, call people to the stand and have them testify in front of a jury as to what they saw or what they heard. Other types of evidence that you might introduce are, one category would be physical evidence, for example, fingerprints, or in the case of a homicide, a murder weapon if you have it. There's also other types of evidence. You may introduce records such as phone conversations or bank records in a criminal trial to prove an individual guilty.
So one type of evidence is people as witnesses, and then we have physical evidence, and that's another category.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. Okay. Our two investigators, when they were up here, I asked what was the most serious crime that they had ever been involved with. And I'd like to ask you the same thing. What serious crime have you handled?
It's funny, when you asked that, I did think about it, and two really come to mind. One that just recently was tried in 1988 involving two individuals by the name of Robert Ahalt and Carl Campbell, who were accused of killing 5 people in a 2-day span. 3 elderly people in a bar on South Avenue, 1 young woman in her apartment in St. Paul, and the death of the young woman was especially brutal because she was pregnant at the time, and she was not only killed, but her body was mutilated. And then the 5th person was another woman who lived about a half a block away from the St. Paul Street address. That was especially sticks out in my mind because of the brutality and also because of the number of killings. The other one that I'll never forget, and it's one that I went to the scene, was a guy by the name of Robert Riley, who was charged with killing his wife and his 3 children. And that just sticks out in my mind because I'll never forget that scene. He had killed his wife by bludgeoning her with a hammer and then cutting her throat. And then he killed each of his 3 children,
Ooh.
who were all under school age. And the way he did it was he took the kids out to breakfast at Red Barn, got takeout breakfast, brought them home, had them sit down and eat the meal, and methodically took them upstairs one at a time and drowned them. in a bathtub and then laid them out next to his wife. So I think those two crimes are just two that I can still see in my mind and stick out, and I remember those. And probably those are the ones that I would put right up there if you asked me what are the most significant crimes that I've prosecuted.
My goodness. So those cases must have taken a lot of time on your part. How much time on average would you say you spend on a case?
It obviously varies, but when I'm on trial or getting ready for trial, I'm usually at work by 6:30, 7 o'clock, and usually they're well past 5. You do work at night, but that's part of, I think, what you need to prosecute a case effectively. When you're prosecuting a case, you live with the case. You wake up in the middle of the night thinking of questions to ask or thinking of areas that you may want to cover. So you do put in a great deal of time when you're in the process of trying a serious case.
Oh. I know that you work with the homicide investigators, and you need to discuss a variety of things with them. What type of things do you need to elicit from them?
Well, two things. When you're in the process of investigating a case, you need to find out exactly what they know, what progress they're making. You want to make sure that any moves that are made are legal moves. That is, any evidence obtained is going to hold up in court. And fortunately, I have a very good working relationship with the Physical Crimes Unit, and I think that accounts for the success we had. I listen to what they say, and they listen to what I say. When it comes down to trial, a very important factor is sitting down with the officers who will testify, such as Investigator Barnes and Borriello, or the technicians as well, and go over the areas that you want to get out at trial. A trial is played by rules. The rules are called the rules of evidence, so you have to be very careful that the questions and the answers that come out at a trial are what the law calls legally admissible.
So what type of rules are you talking about?
Well, they don't make a lot of sense sometimes. But one rule is, for example, hearsay. A witness cannot testify to what they heard someone else say. Let me give you an example. Let's say it's a homicide case, and the victim, shortly before the homicide, went to one of his friends and said, "Look, if anything happens to me, check out John Jones because he's threatened me." That type of, even though it makes sense to bring it in a trial, that type of evidence would not be admissible. It would be called hearsay. I'll give you another good example. Let's say you were prosecuting someone for murder and they had 3 prior convictions for assaulting people, or in fact 3 prior convictions for killing people. That type of evidence would never come before the jury. So a trial, as I said, is played by rules. A lot don't make sense to people, to the common, don't make common sense, but they're extremely important in trying a case. So sometimes all the evidence that we're aware of doesn't come in because the rules of evidence prohibit it.
So earlier, the Brown case was mentioned, and I'm wondering if that broke any of the rules. Could you comment on that?
No. One of the frustrating things about my job, and I think even more so about police work, is sometimes, if you can believe it, police are held to standards that didn't exist at the time they made an arrest. And I'll give you an example. There was a rule that's been the subject of a lot of publicity in New York called the Rogers Rule. It means this, in its basic form, that if an individual has a charge pending, for example, a person has a DWI pending in the town of Arundequoit, and they're picked up on a homicide, and they tell the police, "I want to talk to you." They're read their rights. It's not a case of the police using any trickery or coercion. Guy says, "I want to get it off my chest. I committed this crime." In New York State, his confession can't be used against him for the sole reason he had another charge pending. Now, there have been cases where before that decision was enacted, the police got statements, did it entirely properly, got a good conviction, but because the law changed after the fact, they were held to a standard that didn't exist at the time the arrest was made. That's an example of what I mean by those type of rules that didn't exist at the time the crime occurred. That was the situation in Brown. Everything was done properly at the time of the arrest. Everything was done properly at the time of the first conviction. However, in its infinite wisdom, the Supreme Court chose to change the rules, and we were held to rules that didn't exist at the time of the first trial. Now, if you can make sense out of that, you're a better person than I am.
This is an entirely different topic, but I'm wondering, of all the TV shows on these days about police stories, which do you think is the most realistic?
Well, we were talking about that. I would have to agree with the officer's reaction. Probably Barney Miller, despite the fact that it's being a comedy. I think
Really?
a lot of the things that it portrays are very realistic about police work, about a police officer's day. It's not all glamour. It's not all Starsky and Hutch. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of non-glamorous assignments.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Our time has run out, but we need to take a break from our sponsors, and I want to thank you very much for being with us. I want to thank our audience, our guest today, Chuck Sirgusa, Bob, our technician, Bill and Lenny, our homicide investigators. Thank you very much for being on our program and telling us what the police department is doing. Thank you.